Railroading is 24/7, 365. No matter the time of day, weather, or the season, somewhere there is a green light burning on a main line. I'm Aaron Benson with 7 Idea Productions, and I have been filming trains in the western U.S. and Canada for nearly 25 years. Part of what drives me to go out with a camera and film is the challenge of capturing trains and railroaders at work in the ever-changing conditions they face. From blistering heat in the summer to frigid Arctic conditions in winter, and everything in between. For me, the most challenging and most satisfying is capturing trains in the dead of winter. And that's what this video series is all about. I'm going back to the archives, to the original footage I've shot over the past decade and a half to bring you some of my favorite wintertime scenes that have appeared in many of our 80 programs on railroading in North America. Welcome to Rails Through the Freezer. In this episode, we will travel to the mountains of western Alberta, where Canadian National trains endure winter on Yellowhead Pass. We will watch the Union Pacific battle the legendary grade through Echo Canyon in Utah, and climb to the summit of the Blue Mountains in eastern Oregon. Even in Arizona, BNSF trains battle Old Man Winter in the high country near Flagstaff. The mixture of steam, coal smoke, and snow make for exciting winter railroading at the Colorado and New Mexico border when a 1923 steam-powered rotary snowplow is brought to life on the Cumbres and Toltec. The Rocky Mountains of Montana make a formidable obstacle as BNSF trains endure winter on Marias Pass. And the ultimate winter experience has to be legendary Donner Pass in the Sierra Nevada mountains of Northern California. We will snowshoe into some of our favorite locations and see what it's like to capture shots like this. Let's get going. When you hear the phrase, the dead of winter, maybe this image comes to mind. The frozen Athabasca River fills Alberta's Jasper Lake with stillness. Only the wind moves, and the Canadian National Railway on the far bank. Here, the winter sun is reluctant to rise and eager to set. It is January of 2017, and I'm on location to film scenes for a video titled Canada's Yellowhead Pass. Explorer David Thompson established a trade route through these mountains in the early 1800s, following the Athabasca River. Over 2 centuries later, it still serves that purpose in the form of intermodal containers on a long eastbound stacker out of Vancouver, BC. The easy grade on this line allows long trains like this to run with one engine on the point and one more by remote control tucked in mid-train. A cold snap swept through western Alberta, ending abruptly as a strong Chinook wind began blowing through the Rockies. Temperatures swung from 20 below zero to nearly 40 above Fahrenheit as CN 2953 West crosses the Athabasca with a mixed train out of Edmonton, Alberta. time you hear me use the word we a lot when I'm out filming, and that's because really the most important passenger on my trip is the camera. Okay, I wasn't properly mic'd for this, but basically what I'm talking about is bringing you along on these adventures through the lens of my camera. My goal is to give you the sense of what it's like to be trackside at these amazing locations, in addition to just showing the trains. If you've watched any of my programs in the last 20 years, you will know that the train isn't the only subject that gets screen time. And in that space where there is a lull in traffic, it's nice to see things like Rocky Mountain elk foraging for food not far from the main line. This is near Henry House, east of the town of Jasper. It seems fairly quiet on this January afternoon. The flood of summer tourists temporarily is replaced by a blanket of snow. But who would want to miss a scene like this as CN 8830 leads an eastbound stack train through Jasper National Park? West of Jasper, Yellowhead Lake is hidden under a blanket of snow, while Yellowhead Mountain rises to over 8,000 feet in the background. Westbound CN train 119 heads through the scene, dwarfed by its surroundings. Via Rail Train number 5, the westbound Jasper to Prince Rupert passenger train heads for Red Pass. It's nicknamed the Rupert Rocket. Leaving Canada, we head to the Wasatch Mountains of eastern Utah, not far from the Wyoming border. This is part of Union Pacific's overland route, and a local bound for Evanston, Wyoming, is climbing through Echo Canyon, powered by two classic EMD SD40-2s. The two 16-cylinder 645 E3 diesels produce a combined 6,000 horsepower and sound fantastic in the cold winter air as they battle the grade. Moving west to the state of Oregon, Union Pacific's route over the Blue Mountains is a challenge for locomotives and railroad crews alike. UP 5286 takes a westbound over the top of the grade at Camila and starts down the west side. The mountain grade between La Grande and Camila reaches 2.21%. As soon as the train crests the summit, it immediately begins a 2% downhill run following Meacham Creek toward the Umatilla River east of Pendleton. It's January of 2009, and we find plenty of traffic on UP's La Grande subdivision. This high-priority westbound intermodal is met by UP 6469 East, with a manifest train bound for either Napa or Pocatello, Idaho, or possibly North Platte, Nebraska. This meet gives you a good idea of what UP power looked like back in 2009. A fairly new GEVO number 7722 brings up the rear of the westbound. It was built in 2007. UP 6469 is a typical AC 4400 CW built in the year 2000. Behind it is a former Southern Pacific AC number 225, now patched the UP 6271. AC 4460 CW number 7311 and EMD SD 9043 AC number 8134 make for a great variety. Two more AC 4400 CWs bring up the rear of this heavy manifest. With most of the train now on the downhill side of the apex, these units are being transitioned from power to dynamic braking, remotely controlled by the engineer on the head end of the train. Another regular scene back in 2009 was the K-Line double-stack train with its all-red containers and this one powered by a trio of EMD SD70Ms. You could find SD70 Aces back then, but they weren't as common as they are now. In 2017, a joint venture was formed between Japanese K-Line, NYK, and MOL, creating a consolidated global shipping company under the name Ocean Network Express. But that was still 8 years in the future, as this train climbed eastward through the Blue Mountains. The K-Line train has stopped short of the summit at Camila. It's waiting for an extra-long manifest, which is grinding up the 2.2% grade on the east side of Nordine. UP 5618 is over 11,000 feet in length. Considered quite long at that time, it seems to rise out of the ground as it reaches the top of the hill. When you think of Arizona, think snow. That's what we found while filming between Williams and Flagstaff in April of 2014. A fast-moving snowstorm was moving through the high country south of the Grand Canyon as this westbound BNSF sprints through Maine. The elevation is around 7,300 feet above sea level near the community of Belmont, west of Flagstaff. The wind may be whipping the snow, but fortunately it is at our backs as we set up for another westbound led by BNSF 6530. Although we couldn't tell, we were about to have a meet near the water tank at Belmont. BNSF 7540 is westbound. BNSF 4330 East blows for the crossing. Flagstaff sits at an elevation of 6,902 feet. The Flagstaff Station was built in 1925 by the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe. It resides at 1 East Route 66 and serves Amtrak's Southwest Chief. The gates are activated for BNSF 8211 East. BNSF's Seligman subdivision is part of the busy Southern Transcon, seeing around 80 trains per day. So it isn't too surprising to see headlights approaching through the big snowflakes. BNSF 6848 takes more containers west. Traveling east of Flagstaff, the snow appears to be accumulating a little more, as another eastbound led by BNSF 4121 appears out of the white at McFetridge. The train disappears under the Highway 66 overpass as BNSF 8025 approaches on Track 1. Leaving Arizona, we head to northern New Mexico, where a classic piece of snow fighting equipment lives. The Denver and Rio Grande Western's Rotary OY. During the last day of February and the first day of March 2020, the Cumbres and Toltec Scenic Railroad fired up the 1926 steam-powered rotary snowplow to demonstrate it in action, plowing snow between Chama and the summit of Cumbres Pass in southern Colorado. This is the second day of operation on March 1st, and the Rotary is working up the 4% grade at Coxo and around Windy Point. Rotary OY's boiler generates steam to turn the huge fan, but it needs locomotives to push it. Two K-36 Mikados, number 487 and 484. They were built by the Baldwin Locomotive Works in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania in 1925 for the DNRGW and have worked in excursion service for the Cumbres and Toltec since the 1970s. The Rotary works around Windy Point as it approaches the summit of Cumbres Pass at an elevation of 10,022 feet above sea level. The show of steam, snow, and coal smoke is one we will never forget. Our next stop is Essex, Montana, and the famous Isaac Walton Inn, which for many years was a railfan destination for those wishing to photograph trains on Marias Pass. The former GN main line along the southern boundary of Glacier National Park is ideal if your goal is to watch trains in the snow. Just uphill from the Isaac Walton is a rather meager Amtrak station. Essex serves as a whistle stop for the Empire Builder. On this evening in 2021, BNSF 3280 takes an empty crude oil train east to the Bakken oil fields. Although it is the lowest crossing of the Continental Divide between Canada and central New Mexico, Marias Pass receives an average of 250 to 270 inches of snow each winter. The often heavy snow means railroaders on the hill need to be snow fighters as well. A pair of Jordan spreaders are returning to Essex after plowing the main line. These are one form of snow fighting equipment utilized by BNSF. Another type is known as the snow dozer. It works like this. Snow sheds are built in the most avalanche-prone sections of the railroad, like this one above Essex. Another empty oil train approaches the shed behind BNSF 8204. It meets the 3868 West with a grain train in tow. As the train glides into Essex, let's head further up the mountain. A steady snow is falling at Java East as a westbound intermodal train heads down the 1.8% grade behind BNSF 6352. The train is running 2x2. SD70 Mac number 9826 assists a GEVO on the rear of this train. It was built in March of 1997 for the BNSF. BNSF's Highline subdivision skirts the southern flanks of Running Rabbit and Snowslip Mountains as a double-track main line climbs toward the summit of Marias Pass. This is a snowshed district, with 11 sheds placed between Essex and Blacktail. This eastbound empty crude oil train is exiting Shed 7 as it climbs through Single Shot. As it enters Shed 6, it meets a westbound oil train. Exiting Shed 4D, the eastbound meets the rear power of the westbound at the former snow shed 4C, which was destroyed by fire years ago. As the sign tells us, the summit of Marias Pass is just under a mile at 5,215 feet. John Frank Stevens explored and charted the pass in 1889. He was principal engineer of the Great Northern Railway, and Stevens Pass in Washington State is named after him. BNSF 5037 leads an empty grain train over the Continental Divide on the 27th day of February 2021. As a bonus, we catch Heritage Unit number 6017, honoring the fallen flags that make up today's BNSF. A helper set sneaks past on the far track. The railroad skirts the southern boundary of Glacier National Park. Covering over 1,500 square miles and including parts of 2 mountain ranges, Glacier Park owes its existence to the Great Northern Railroad. GN lobbied Congress to protect the region from development. In 1897, it was designated by the U.S. Congress as a forest preserve, and in 1910, it became a national park. The classic GN depot at East Glacier is used seasonally by Amtrak's Empire Builder. BNSF 6832 crosses over the park entrance off U.S. Highway 2 as it heads eastward. SD70 Mac number 9650 gives this train a little shove through East Glacier as the train leaves the Montana Rockies behind. A pair of light engines are lined through the siding at Summit and pass beneath the old GN cantilever signal bridge on a chilly evening. March is just around the corner, but spring is still a long ways off for those whose job is to run trains over Marias Pass. This is Truckee, California. It's a bit of a tourist town, given its proximity to Lake Tahoe. Its wintry appearance is the result of its proximity to Donner Pass. And it is a railroad town, given its proximity to the old Central Pacific Transcontinental Main Line. This is March of 2010. While much of California embraces the season of spring, railroaders who work in the Sierra Nevada mountains prepare to do battle with some of the heaviest snowfall of the year. This is UP 600. It is an EMD GP38-2 locomotive fitted for snow fighting service. That rack on top of the cab is an icebreaker used for removing icicles which can form in the numerous tunnels found on Donner Pass. The engine has spinning bad weather windows, often found on ships, and hopefully a good working cab heater. The 600 and sister engine, the UP 589, are pulling a flanger, which removes snow from between the rails. It is making an evening run over Donner Pass. It will turn at Fulda, west of Emigrant Gap, and return to Truckee later tonight.
Stand by there. Standing by.
The next morning, we find ourselves at Troy, while a set of Jordan spreaders push heavy snow away from Track 1, using the nose and wing plow of the lead spreader. Another pair of GP38-2s power this set, which includes a second spreader on the rear for plowing in the opposite direction. Another spreader set out of Truckee plows eastward up Main 1 between Troy and Soda Springs. This one is powered by 4 engines. The spreader meets the UP 4930 west as it takes a short intermodal train down Main 2. Snowshoeing a little farther west, we happen upon UP 5342 as it leads a westbound stack train through the wintry scene.
Number 5 by your location, let's see, give you a box.
One challenge to filming trains in the snow is nailing focus when most of the world is white. UP 602 flanges east through Soda Springs near the summit of Donner Pass. Yeah, I know what you're thinking. And you're right. That was snow from the pilot, and this was the flanger.
Okay, what you can't see is I just got flanged.
After ballooning the flanger at Truckee, the 602 returns west. Donner Pass receives an average of 34 feet of snow annually, making it one of the snowiest locations in the U.S., at least in the lower 48 states. It is connected in name with the tragic story of the Donner Party, who were snowbound during the winter of 1846 and 47. Looking at Donner Peak, we can see parts of the snow shed that still protect the old number 1 track, although it is no longer used. At one time, there were around 40 miles of snow sheds on Donner. Another tool at the railroad's disposal is the Leslie Rotary Snowplow. SPMW 209 sits at Truckee after clearing a path over Donner Pass in the winter of 2011. The day before, we captured this footage as it cleared snow over the top of Donner Pass, while a winter storm raged on. The wind-blown snow made shooting difficult for this group of photographers who braved the elements on the snowbank above the main line. Like the Rotary OY we saw on the Cumbres and Toltec, these SP Rotary snowplows were originally steam-powered, but were rebuilt in the 1950s to electric, powered by diesel locomotive traction motors. The cabless engine behind the Rotary provides electrical power for the wheel. At Norden, the Rotary reaches the top of Donner Pass at an elevation of 7,240 feet above sea level. The Sierra Nevada mountains are the first major obstacle for storms laden with precipitation coming off the Pacific Ocean. That is why it is one of the snowiest places in North America. The heaviest snowfall on record is 819 inches, set back in the winter of 1937-38. The winter of 1952 saw nearly 65 feet of snow, and the deepest snowpack ever recorded at 26 feet. The Rotary continues into the night, clearing snow from the main line down the east side of the pass to Truckee. It's time to don our snowshoes again and head back to the car and that waiting thermos of hot coffee. From Canada to Arizona and all places in between, I hope you've enjoyed looking back at some of my favorite snow scenes as we explore railroading in the freezer. As always, until next time, thanks for watching.